The auditorium in Washington, D.C. thrummed with electric anticipation. Rows upon rows of seats filled with journalists, policymakers, and engaged citizens, all under the harsh glow of overhead lights that cast long shadows across the polished wooden stage. Banners draped the walls, touting themes of bipartisan dialogue and economic renewal, while the faint hum of air conditioning mingled with the murmur of hushed conversations. Cameras from major networks stood poised like sentinels. Lenses trained on the podium were a nonpartisan moderator, prepared to launch the evening's forum on America's fiscal challenges. The event had drawn a diverse crowd, from think tank scholars to grassroots activists, each hoping for insights or sparks that could cut through the nation's partisan gridlock. As the clock ticked toward the start time, the air grew thicker with expectation, the kind that precedes a debate where ideas clash like thunderheads on a summer horizon. Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana ascended the steps to his panel seat, his stride measured and assured, exuding the unflappable poise of a veteran lawmaker who had faced tougher rooms than this. His suit was impeccably tailored, yet his demeanor carried the easygoing vibe of a back porch storyteller, ready to unpack complex policies with the clarity of a Louisiana sunrise. Across the stage, Congresswoman Maxine Waters claimed her spot. Her posture straight and commanding, eyes alight with the fierce determination that had defined her decades-long fight for justice and equity. The contrast was immediate and striking. Kennedy's calm Southern reserve against Waters's bold, unapologetic intensity, setting the tone for what promised to be a riveting exchange on everything from budget deficits to job creation in underserved communities. The moderator, a respected journalist with a reputation for fairness, cleared his throat into the microphone, welcoming the audience and outlining the ground rules: respectful interruptions only, focus on facts, and a commitment to finding common ground amid disagreement. Applause rippled through the hall, polite but charged. As the panelists adjusted their notes and water glasses, the weight of national attention pressing down like an invisible force. Kennedy, ever the strategist, scanned the crowd with a subtle nod, his mind already racing through key points on fiscal conservatism. How prudent spending could safeguard Social Security for retirees, bolster small businesses reeling from inflation, and invest in infrastructure without mortgaging the future. He envisioned his opening remarks not as a monologue, but as an invitation, drawing on anecdotes from Louisiana's resilient Gulf Coast towns where economic recovery after storms had hinged on smart, accountable governance rather than reckless outlays. Waters, meanwhile, gripped her pen tightly, her thoughts laser-focused on countering with calls for progressive reforms, targeted aid to low-income families, changes to banking regulations that had long disadvantaged minority entrepreneurs, and a push for wealth taxes to redistribute opportunities more equitably. The stage lights warmed, highlighting the American flags flanking the panel, symbols of the unity both sides claimed to seek. As the moderator yielded the floor, Kennedy leaned forward first, his voice emerging in that distinctive drawl, smooth as river water over polished stones. "Folks, we've got real challenges ahead," he began. "But let's talk straight about the economy like we're sitting around the kitchen table back home. You know, in Louisiana, we've learned the hard way that you can't spend your way out of a hole without digging it deeper. It's about balance, protecting the folks who work hard every day, from the oil rig worker in the bayou to the teacher in a New Orleans classroom." His words flowed with the rhythm of a seasoned orator, blending data with down-home wisdom, citing how recent fiscal reports showed national debt climbing like kudzu in July, threatening to choke out opportunities for the next generation. He painted vivid pictures of small-town revival where tax cuts had sparked new businesses, creating jobs that lifted families without the burden of higher taxes or slashed services. The audience leaned in, some nodding in agreement, others jotting notes as Kennedy's relatable style made the abstract tangible. likening federal budgets to a family checkbook, where every dollar counts and waste is the enemy of progress. He elaborated on energy policy, a cornerstone of his state's economy, explaining how streamlined regulations could boost domestic production, lower gas prices at the pump, and fund environmental protections without overseas dependencies. "We're not just talking numbers here," he added with a chuckle. "We're talking about putting food on the table for American families, not shipping jobs overseas." Asterisk laughter echoed softly, warming the room as his humor underscored the seriousness without overwhelming it. But as Kennedy transitioned to critiquing expansive social spending programs, arguing that they often came with unintended consequences like inflation that hit low-income households hardest, the atmosphere shifted. Waters, who had been listening with a tight smile, her fingers drumming lightly on the table, saw an opening to pivot the discussion toward systemic inequities. Her passion for financial reform was unmatched, and she viewed Kennedy's approach as short-sighted, ignoring the root causes of poverty that demanded bold, immediate action. Without waiting for a pause, she leaned into her mic, her voice cutting through like a clarion call. "Sit down," she declared firmly, the words sharp and authoritative, laced with the frustration of someone who had spent a career battling for the underdog. "Your so-called balance is just code for leaving people behind. It's time we address the real issues, not pat ourselves on the back for half measures." The command echoed in the sudden silence, a verbal gauntlet thrown that stunned the room into stillness. Gasps escaped from the front rows where reporters' fingers flew across keyboards, capturing the moment that screamed headline. The moderator's eyes darted between them, hand raised halfway to intervene. While the audience exchanged wide-eyed glances, the tension palpable like the moment before a storm breaks. This wasn't mere interruption. It was a power play, Waters asserting dominance in a space where her advocacy often faced resistance. Aiming to redirect the narrative to the disparities she knew all too well from her district's streets. Flashbulbs erupted, social media feeds already lighting up with previews of the clip as everyone wondered how Kennedy would counter. Would he fire back with equal fervor, turning the forum into a spectacle of division? In that frozen instant, the hall held its breath, the weight of the exchange hanging heavy, a microcosm of the broader battles raging in Congress and across living rooms nationwide. Yet Kennedy didn't rise to the bait. His face remained serene, a faint, knowing smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The kind born from years of courtroom battles and Senate floor skirmishes where composure was currency. He adjusted his glasses thoughtfully, taking a deliberate sip of water to let the moment breathe, then responded with the wit that had become his trademark. "Well, ma'am," he said, his drawl stretching the words with gentle amusement. "If I sit down right now, who's going to explain how we can lift everybody up without sinking the ship? I hear what you're saying about fairness, and Lord knows we've got to do better on that front. But let's hash this out together. I've got some ideas from down in Louisiana that might just bridge the gap between your vision and mine." The reply was pure gold, disarming, inclusive, and laced with that southern charm that turned confrontation into conversation. Chuckles bubbled up from the crowd, evolving into appreciative applause that rippled outward. Diffusing the bomb Waters had lobbed, it wasn't deflection for deflection's sake. It was a master stroke of rhetoric, acknowledging her point while steering back to substance, inviting collaboration rather than combat. Kennedy's eyes met hers briefly, a nod of respect in his gaze, signaling that he valued the debate, not the drama. The room exhaled collectively, the energy recalibrating from adversarial to engaged, as Waters, though undaunted, found herself responding to his olive branch with a measured rebuttal on investment returns for marginalized groups. Kennedy listened actively, interjecting only to build on shared ground, such as agreeing that education funding was non-negotiable while proposing efficiency audits to maximize impact. He delved deeper into examples from his state, recounting how post-hurricane recovery efforts had combined federal aid with local innovation, creating resilient economies that served all residents, black, white, rich, or poor. It's not about left or right, he emphasized. It's about what's right for the American people, getting results that stick. His analogies kept coming. The economy likened to a gumbo pot, where the right ingredients and balance create something nourishing for everyone. Not a watery soup that leaves folks hungry. The audience, now hooked, applauded his inclusivity, sensing a leader who prioritized solutions over sound bites. As questions from the floor began, a young entrepreneur asked about startup incentives. And Kennedy fielded it with precision, linking it to broader fiscal health, suggesting tax credits that encouraged hiring in high unemployment areas without exploding the deficit. Waters challenged the feasibility, citing historical data on inequality. And Kennedy countered not with dismissal, but with data of his own from Louisiana's job growth statistics post-reform. The interplay was dynamic, Kennedy's steady hand guiding the flow. His earlier quip lingering as the highlight that humanized the high-stakes talk. Reporters whispered praise for his grace, one tweeting, "Kennedy just turned tension into teamwork class act." He expanded on healthcare ties to the economy, advocating for market-driven reforms that lowered costs through competition, drawing parallels to how Louisiana's rural clinics had thrived under similar models. "We can't afford to ignore the basics," he said, "but we also can't pretend more spending fixes everything without a plan." His voice remained even, persuasive without pressure, earning nods even from skeptics. Waters pressed on poverty alleviation, and Kennedy wove in empathy, sharing a story of a Baton Rouge family he'd met whose small business boomed after regulatory relief, proving conservative policies could empower the very communities she championed. This chapter of the opening unfolded like a well-crafted novel, with Kennedy as the unflappable protagonist. His response to the sit-down, not just stunning, but transformative, shifting the forum from potential fiasco to an exemplar of civil discourse. As the moderator transitioned to the next segment, the hall buzzed with renewed vigor, attendees tapping on their phones about Kennedy's poise, the moment already viral in snippets. He had stunned everyone not with volume but with virtue, intelligence wrapped in humility. A reminder that true leadership shines brightest in the face of fire. The debate pressed on, Kennedy elaborating on trade's role in economic stability using shrimp fishermen, analogies to illustrate fair deals that protected jobs while boosting exports. His points were layered, backed by charts projected behind him, yet explained in plain English that bridged divides. When a retiree voiced concerns about Social Security solvency, Kennedy reassured with specifics on entitlement reforms that preserved benefits through growth, not cuts. Waters interjected on equity gaps in retirement savings, and he agreed on the need for inclusion, proposing bipartisan working groups to tackle it. Throughout, his demeanor stayed rock solid, the initial exchange a foundation for fruitful friction. Cameras captured it all, the clip of his witty retort, looping in previews, positioning Kennedy as the voice of reason in a noisy world. By the end of this phase, as applause swelled for a balanced close, it was clear Kennedy hadn't just survived the storm, he'd navigated it with nautical skill, leaving the audience inspired and the conversation elevated. Asterisk, this was the start of something memorable, a testament to his ability to stun with substance over spectacle, setting a tone of respect that promised deeper dives ahead. The lights dimmed slightly for a break, but the energy lingered. Whispers of admiration for the senator who turned a command into a catalyst for connection, as the initial sparks from the opening exchange faded into a more rhythmic back and forth. The debate delved deeper into the thorny terrain of social issues intertwined with economic policy, where passions ran high and statistics clashed like opposing waves in a choppy sea. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Undeterred by Senator John Kennedy's deft deflection, ramped up her challenges. Her voice rising with the conviction of someone who had spent years on the front lines of advocacy, pushing for reforms that addressed systemic barriers head-on. She leaned forward, gesturing emphatically as she dissected Kennedy's fiscal conservatism, accusing it of overlooking the human cost. How budget cuts disproportionately affected communities of color widened the wealth gap, and ignored the urgent need for investments in education and healthcare that could break cycles of poverty. Your so-called balance, she pressed, her tone sharp and unyielding, is nothing more than a smokescreen for maintaining the status quo, where the rich get richer and the rest scramble for scraps. We've seen it time and again, policies that sound prudent on paper, but leave families in my district drowning in debt for medical bills, or unable to afford college for their kids. How do you justify that in the name of fiscal responsibility? Her words landed with force, echoing through the auditorium like a call to arms, drawing murmurs of agreement from pockets of the audience who shared her progressive leanings, their nods visible under the stage lights as cameras panned to capture the intensity. Waters backed her points with a barrage of data, citing reports on income inequality that showed stagnant wages for the working class while corporate profits soared. And she challenged Kennedy to explain how his approach would tackle root causes like discriminatory lending practices that had plagued neighborhoods for generations. She aimed to dominate the narrative, her rhetorical style bold and confrontational, attempting to paint his views as out of touch with the realities faced by everyday Americans struggling to make ends meet in an economy that favored the elite. The moderator nodded along, allowing the flow to continue, while journalists typed furiously, sensing the debate's pulse quickening into something that could dominate the evening news cycle. But Kennedy, ever the picture of composure, didn't match her volume or velocity. Instead, he absorbed her volley like a seasoned boxer dodging jabs, waiting for the right moment to counter with precision rather than power. He sat back slightly, his expression thoughtful, fingers steepled as he listened intently, showing no signs of defensiveness or irritation, traits that had served him well through countless hearings and town halls back in Louisiana. When he finally spoke, his response was a masterclass in logical deconstruction, delivered in that trademark Southern drawl that carried warmth and wisdom without a hint of condescension. "Congresswoman, I respect the fire you bring to this fight. Lord knows we need more folks like you calling out injustices," he began, his voice steady and inclusive, immediately acknowledging her perspective to build a bridge rather than a wall. "But let's break this down a bit, shall we? You're right that we've got deep-seated problems with inequality, and ignoring them ain't going to make them go away. The question is how we fix them without creating new ones. Take those medical bills you mentioned. I've heard the same stories from folks in Baton Rouge and Lake Charles, families buried under costs they never saw coming. My view isn't about cutting for cutting's sake. It's about targeting resources where they do the most good, like expanding competition in healthcare to drive prices down naturally instead of pouring more money into a system that's already bloated and inefficient." He wove in real-world evidence seamlessly, referencing studies on how deregulated markets in certain states had lowered premiums by double digits, all while maintaining coverage for vulnerable populations. Facts presented not as weapons, but as shared tools for problem-solving. The audience leaned in, captivated by his ability to humanize data, turning cold numbers into relatable realities that resonated across the political spectrum. Waters pushed back immediately, escalating her tone as she highlighted the failures of past conservative policies, pointing to instances where deregulation had led to corporate abuses and widened disparities. Her gestures broad and emphatic as she sought to reclaim momentum. "That's easy to say from a distance," she retorted, "but in the real world, your ideas leave people without a safety net. Kids in underfunded schools, seniors choosing between medicine and meals." We need bold action now, not more talk of balance that balances nothing. Her challenge was pointed, designed to corner him into defending what she framed as heartless austerity. And the room tensed again, whispers rippling as spectators anticipated his reply. Kennedy, however, pivoted with intellectual agility, refusing to engage in emotional escalation and instead drawing on logic to dismantle her assumptions piece by piece. "I hear you loud and clear on the urgency," he replied calmly, his eyes meeting hers with genuine respect. "And I agree. We can't wait around while folks suffer." But bold doesn't always mean big government spending. Sometimes it means smart incentives that empower people directly. Let me tell you about a fellow I know back home in Louisiana. Call him Joe, a hardworking mechanic from a small town near the Mississippi River. Joe grew up in poverty, same as a lot of families in underserved areas with schools that were falling apart and no clear path out. But when we implemented targeted tax credits for job training programs, ones that didn't bust the budget but partnered with local businesses, he got certified in advanced auto tech. Now he's running his own shop, employing a dozen folks from his neighborhood and sending his kids to college debt-free. That's not theory. That's results from listening to what people actually need and crafting policies that lift without leaning too heavy on the taxpayer. The story landed like a gentle thunder, personal and poignant, illustrating the value of empathy in policymaking without resorting to grandstanding. Kennedy's anecdote wasn't just filler. It highlighted the core of his philosophy that true progress comes from understanding individual struggles and applying pragmatic solutions that foster, and the crowd responded with thoughtful silence at first, then scattered applause as the tale's universality sank in, bridging the gap between abstract debates and lived experiences. Asterisk, he continued, layering on evidence from economic analyses, showing how such programs had reduced unemployment in similar communities by significant margins, all while keeping national debt in check to avoid future burdens like higher interest rates that could stifle growth. Waters, sensing the shift in the room's energy, doubled down on her critique, accusing his examples of being cherry-picked and ignoring broader structural issues, like racial discrimination in hiring and lending that required federal oversight to eradicate. Her delivery was forceful, aiming to overwhelm with a cascade of examples from urban districts where poverty persisted despite local initiatives, her voice echoing with the authority of first-hand knowledge. "Stories are nice," she said pointedly, "but they don't change systems. We need comprehensive reforms, not piecemeal fixes that leave too many behind." The exchange intensified, with Waters pressing for details on how his conservatism addressed entrenched inequalities. Her questions rapid-fire and designed to expose potential weaknesses in his logic. Yet Kennedy met each thrust with poise, his responses rooted in facts and delivered with unflinching clarity, never raising his volume but elevating the discourse through sheer intellect. "Fair point on systems," he conceded graciously, "and you're spot on that we've got to tackle discrimination at its roots. That's why I've supported bills for fair lending audits and vocational partnerships in minority-owned businesses, measures that enforce accountability without creating dependency." In Louisiana, we've seen how combining enforcement with economic freedom has opened doors. Minority entrepreneurship up 20% in the last few years, according to state reports. It's about blending justice with opportunity, not choosing one over the other. His ability to integrate her concerns into his framework was seamless, demonstrating a depth of understanding that stunned skeptics and earned quiet nods from moderates in the audience. As this chapter of sharp dialogue unfolded, Kennedy's approach shone through, a blend of logic, real-world proof, and heartfelt stories that connected on a human level, proving that effective debate doesn't require domination, but rather a commitment to understanding. He recounted another brief tale, this time of a community center in New Orleans, reborn through public-private grants, where listening to local voices led to programs that taught skills and built bonds. reducing crime and boosting graduation rates without massive federal overhauls. The key, he emphasized, is hearing folks out, really hearing them, and building from there. That's how we turn division into direction. The room absorbed his words, the tension easing into engagement as audience members began submitting questions that built on the exchange. Probing deeper into hybrid solutions, Kennedy fielded them with the same poise, explaining how fiscal restraint could fund social priorities through growth-generated revenue. Using charts projected on screens to visualize balanced budgets that prioritized aid for the needy. Waters interjected with counters on immediate needs, but each time he responded by finding overlap, agreeing on the moral imperative for equity while advocating sustainable paths forward. Reporters captured the nuance, headlines forming about the senator's savvy in navigating choppy waters without capsizing the conversation. His intelligence was on full display, not through flashy oratory, but through thoughtful rebuttals that invited reflection, making the debate richer for all involved. As this segment wound down, the moderator praised the depth and applause swelled. With Kennedy emerging as the anchor of reason, his methods a blueprint for bridging divides in a fractured era. The story pressed on, but this chapter had etched his mark. A leader who debated with brain over brawn, stunning everyone with the power of patient persuasion. Kennedy elaborated further on education reform, tying it to social mobility with examples from Louisiana's charter schools that had outperformed expectations on modest budgets, fostering innovation that closed achievement gaps. It's not about spending more, it's about spending smarter, he quipped, drawing laughs that lightened the heavy topics. When Waters challenged the equity of such models, he countered with data on diverse enrollment and outcomes, proposing national pilots to scale successes. The interplay was electric, yet civil. Kennedy's steady logic cutting through rhetoric like a knife through fog, earning admiration from across the aisle. He shared insights on criminal justice ties to the economy, advocating for rehabilitation programs that reduced recidivism and saved costs. Stories of reformed lives underscoring his points, asterisk, by the chapter's end. The dialogue had evolved from sharp to enlightening. Kennedy's role pivotal in that transformation. His intellect, the quiet force that kept the ship steady amid the storm of ideas. As the debate barreled toward its climax, the auditorium's atmosphere thickened like a gathering storm. The earlier exchanges having built a foundation of respectful tension that now teetered on the edge of outright confrontation. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, sensing an opportunity to press her advantage, ramped up the intensity, her voice booming with the unbridled passion that had made her a force in Washington for decades. She zeroed in on Senator John Kennedy's emphasis on fiscal restraint, framing it as a barrier to real progress. Her words slicing through the air like a prosecutor's closing argument. "Your anecdotes are charming, Senator, but they don't mask the reality," she declared. Her eyes locked on him with unwavering focus. "This so-called prudence of yours ignores the cries of millions trapped in cycles of inequality. Families in crumbling neighborhoods, workers earning poverty wages while corporations rake in record profits. How can you sit there and advocate for more of the same tired policies that have failed generation after generation? It's not balance. It's blindness to the suffering right in front of us." Her critique was relentless, piling on examples of failed conservative initiatives that, in her view, exacerbated divides rather than healed them. Deregulation leading to environmental hazards in low-income areas. Tax breaks benefiting the wealthy while social services withered. The room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that amplifies every rustle of paper or shift in a seat as the audience held its collective breath, waiting to see if this would shatter the fragile civility Kennedy had so carefully nurtured. Journalists leaned forward, pens poised, while the moderator hesitated, allowing the moment to unfold in its raw intensity. Waters' escalation was strategic, designed to force Kennedy into a defensive posture, exposing what she saw as the flaws in his worldview and rallying her supporters in the crowd, who murmured approvals that rippled like undercurrents. The pressure mounted palpably, the stage lights seeming harsher, casting stark shadows that mirrored the ideological chasm between them. Would Kennedy crack under the assault, retaliate with equal fervor, or somehow navigate this minefield without exploding the dialogue? All eyes turned to him, the hush so profound it felt like the prelude to a revelation. Yet in that crucible of criticism, Kennedy remained an island of calm, his face betraying no flicker of anger or unease, only the thoughtful crease of a brow as he absorbed her barrage with the patience of a seasoned navigator charting rough waters. He waited a beat, letting her words settle, then leaned into the microphone with deliberate poise, his southern accent wrapping around his response like a comforting drawl that invited rather than imposed. "Congresswoman, you've laid out some powerful truths there, and I won't pretend otherwise. Inequality is a stain on our nation's promise, and ignoring it would be a betrayal of the folks we serve," he acknowledged graciously, his voice, even and earnest, immediately validating her concerns to disarm the attack without conceding defeat. "I've seen that suffering up close in Louisiana. From flood-ravaged towns to urban blocks fighting for a fair shot, and it keeps me up at night, just like it does you. But here's where I think we can meet. Instead of seeing our approaches as enemies, what if we found the overlaps? You're spot on about needing investments in those communities, so let's talk specifics. How about we collaborate on a bipartisan bill for infrastructure grants tied to job training, funded through efficient public-private partnerships that stretch every dollar without hiking taxes sky high? I've got drafts from my office that build on ideas like yours for equitable distribution, ensuring no neighborhood gets left behind. Asterisk, what do you say we roll up our sleeves right here and hash out a framework that marries your passion for justice with my focus on sustainability?" His invitation was a pivot of pure leadership genius, open, collaborative, and grounded in shared goals, transforming her criticism into a springboard for unity rather than division. And the audience stirred the silence, breaking into whispers of surprise and admiration as they processed his response. Not a dodge, but a direct bridge across the divide, emphasizing common ground over conquest. Waters paused, her expression shifting from confrontational to contemplative. Caught off guard by his willingness to engage rather than entrench, the room's energy flipping palpably from the brink of fracture to a budding sense of possibility, as spectators began to applaud sporadically, their claps building into a wave that celebrated Kennedy's unflappable spirit of reconciliation. He elaborated briefly on the proposed solution, sketching out how such grants had revitalized parts of Louisiana post-disaster, creating thousands of jobs in construction and tech, while incorporating equity metrics to prioritize underserved areas, all without ballooning the deficit. Adding with a humble smile that it was not about winning the argument, but about winning for the American people, and finding that sweet spot where all move forward together. His words resonated deeply, drawing nods from across the ideological spectrum, including a few from Waters supporters who appreciated the olive branch. As the moderator seized the moment to facilitate follow-up questions that built on Kennedy's proposal, and the discussion evolved into a more constructive vein with Waters, offering tentative refinements that showed glimmers of agreement. Kennedy's handling of peak pressure showcased his leadership prowess, a blend of humility, strategic insight, and genuine empathy that turned potential rupture into repair. And as the chapter crested, the audience's shift was evident from tense observers to inspired participants, many whispering about how his calm resolve modeled the healing America needed. Reporters captured the turnaround, framing stories around the senator's masterful redirection and his ability to lead through listening rather than lecturing. While Kennedy shared a quick anecdote of a cross-party effort in his state where differing views forged a flood control project benefiting all. underscoring that division dissolves when dialogue deepens. The applause swelling, again as a testament to his reconciling touch, and leaving the forum stronger and the crowd buoyed by his example of grace under fire. This pinnacle moment etched Kennedy as the architect of harmony. His response not just stunning, but salvaging, paving the way for a debate that transcended partisanship. And as tensions eased, he fielded an audience query on bridging urban-rural divides with the same inclusive flair, proposing regional hubs for shared resources that echoed Waters' equity focus. Her counters meeting his concessions as the exchange became symbiotic rather than adversarial thanks to his pivotal steer. By chapters close the room hummed with optimism. Kennedy's leadership, the quiet catalyst that converted conflict into coalition and built a beacon for a nation yearning for such statesmanship. The auditorium, still vibrating from charged exchanges, settled into a reflective hush as the debate drew to a close. The air infused with resolution rather than rivalry. And Senator John Kennedy and Congresswoman Maxine Waters, having navigated the storm of their ideological clash, stood at a crossroads of mutual respect. Earlier tensions giving way to shared acknowledgement of the need for progress over partisanship. As the moderator signaled the final segment, Kennedy took the lead to wrap up, his steady Southern cadence anchoring the evening as he said they had been through a lot. That disagreement and fierce debate were inevitable. But at the end of the day, all were there to make life better for the people they serve. Thanking Waters for her fire and fight for fairness and urging continued dialogue. His sincere words prompting a nod from Waters, who rose to meet the moment, softened yet resolute, extending a hand that Kennedy clasped firmly in a handshake symbolizing not capitulation, but commitment to dialogue. Met with a swell of applause from an audience moved by its simplicity and power. The room exhaled collectively as spectators recognized the rarity of such a moment in a polarized era. The relieved moderator thanking both for their candor, while Kennedy's closing call for unity lingered like a quiet promise. And as the lights dimmed, the impact rippled outward with smartphones lighting up. Clips of the handshake and his words going viral within minutes. Hashtags praising his ability to transform conflict into coalition trending as his poise became a beacon for a weary nation. News outlets raced to publish recaps lauding his leadership. Waters supporters acknowledged his respectful engagement. Grassroots response surged with donations and messages inspired by his approach. And beyond politics, the moment resonated with everyday Americans who saw in his restraint a model for tough conversations. The lesson clear and profound that true strength lies not in overpowering others, but in listening, reasoning, and finding shared ground even when it feels impossible. As Kennedy had not sought the spotlight, he'd earned it by holding fast to principles of respect and pragmatism, proving that leadership shines brightest when it lifts others up. As the educational takeaway crystallized while the story spread in a world quick to divide, showing that patience and empathy are the true tools of progress. A message Kennedy embodied by turning a heated command to sit down into a call to stand together. His legacy from that night was not merely a viral clip, but a blueprint for discourse, encouraging all to approach conflict with open ears and steady hearts while fostering solutions that endure beyond the stage. And as the crowd dispersed, murmurs of hope lingered around Kennedy's example. A reminder that unity is not a dream but a discipline, one he practiced with stunning clarity.